Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 70, The Philosopher's Stone. Update first, as some of you already know, a lot of you already know actually, I happen to be right in the middle of changing a few of my properties, buying new properties in California, and moving, actually physically shifting two of my businesses from one location to other locations, which in this current California property market that is chaotic, to say the least, is very complicated. So no, there was no podcast lesson last week, but there was a lot of packing and logistics going on my end, and there may be some inventory shortages in the Lux shop online for a week or so coming up here, just because everything's handmade in that specific shop by me, and my hands will be very busy elsewhere over the next week or two with things like getting this little podcast studio shifted from one physical place and then set back up in another. So it's a bit of a balancing act going on for a minute. Bear with me. Also, quick shout out to the individual who found the free skull votive gift in their purchase and told me that it was inappropriate, quote unquote, I want a refund because it makes me uncomfortable. I'm for sure going to honor anyone and give them a refund when they return merchandise to me. So when you return the merchandise you purchased, you're welcome to have a full refund, no questions asked, no matter how you behave. But you might want to consider that if directing your own choices and intentions willfully to show and engage with the content of an occult store, a magic shop of any kind, to then complain in a polarized fashion about any kind of symbol that you may come across therein and how it makes you uncomfortable, you probably haven't quite gotten the hang of what magic actually is yet. Because all things are colored by our interpretations of them. And if your perspective is as reactionary and biased as this seems to be, there's more work to be done internally, friend. A lot more. And it's probably best to do that inner awareness and balancing alchemical evolutionary work before dabbling among genuine practitioners of the craft. A skull, for instance, is, yes, perceived as a symbol of death by the masses. But you might want to take into mind that death isn't necessarily a bad thing. And also, historically, the skull is a symbol of time itself, not just of our mortality, but of time as it progresses, of the temporality of the physical plane. And in many cultures, the skull means rebirth and not death at all, because death precedes that transformation. Renaissance artists were sneaking mini skulls and hourglasses into their great artworks for decades as an homage to higher levels of ethics and morality. So it isn't necessarily going to make you more ethical or moral to be afraid of something like a skull. If you're hung up on the idea of a skull being bad, one, you only think it's bad because that's the limited way in which you are choosing to think. Two, you're choosing to emotionally react to an entirely unpolarized scenario, a free gift, and hence need to work on your energy management skills because you're wasting energy. And three, you are really limiting yourself like a horse with blinders on. You've been conditioned to think a certain way, very honestly brainwashed, and that's a mechanism of someone else's control over you. So you've got the hypocrisy of being troubled by clean symbols of a natural process that you, along with everyone else, will absolutely not ever actually be able to avoid. When we see, say, super religious, holier-than-thou people going, oh, someone has a skull on their t-shirt, that's a symbol of evil and running away. that doesn't make them a more ethical person. It certainly doesn't make them stronger energetically. What it means is they're being controlled by something, by the mindset they've been conditioned to, by the perceptions that have been forced down their throat. None of that is enlightened. Death is part of the cycle of life. And if you can't get there in your own head, which is kind of funny if you think about it for a second, if you can't get there in your own skull without taking offense, then the occult just isn't something you should be dabbling with yet. There's more work to be done. You'll do yourself more harm than good if you're playing with magic from this perspective. Even if you're one of those people, we've all met people like this, super neo-pagans, super light workers, where everything must be good and bright and shiny all the time. That's not reality. That doesn't carry context. And that actually can make people incredibly weak and easily to subvert when they carry around a perception like that. Everyone carries a skull around with them every day, under their flesh. It's right on top of your spine, no joke. Being uncomfortable with the imagery of one speaks to a subconscious uncomfort of the self as you are truly on this manifested physical plane. And it can be seen as downright ignorance or hypocrisy. And those things, ignorance, hypocrisy, those are things that all wizards, genuine witches, genuine magicians, magi, high priests, what all of us authentic occultists strive to be consciously aware of and not beholden to in ourselves or others. Occult purposes 101, agenda of the occult, actively, laboriously, truth seek. Not drone along in lazy ignorance. A good lesson for all of us to keep in mind and as fully and ably as we may. Thinking that you're some do-gooder neo-pagan doesn't actually make you a good person any more than, people that think they're wonderful, say Christians, and we're slaughtering other people for having different religions made them good people. Self-righteous or zealotry committed to seeing and finding evil in everything around ourselves is actually the opposite of being in harmony with things like nature or the elements or bright shiny spirits or angels or anything else that you might define as being part of your spiritual magical practices. Seeing quote-unquote badness in the imagery of things like a skull, that lacks all biologic common sense. But more importantly, it reveals quite a bit more about you in your mirroring of how you perceive reality as some frightening thing to be constantly uncomfortable with than it does about what you're viewing as actually being bad. Seeing evil all around you says more about you than it says about what you're seeing. Being sanctimonious is probably just about as far as anyone can get from being actually enlightened. And if something as simple as, say, a skull votive candle, which I put as a free gift into, some of the Lux occult packages that get mailed out, if something like that is able to elicit a fear response from you or an uncomfort response within you, then you're being ruled by symbols rather than raised by them, which no one has to be. There is no reason why you can't take authority and responsibility for yourself to where nothing should be able to make you this reactionary uncomfortable. It's very likely you've been conditioned by some very limiting mentality to think and automatically behave in that way. And that isn't, energetic skill and experience. Skulls aren't what's evil in this scenario that I'm discussing. No one has to be ruled by things. And it's no one's choice but your own when you are being automatically ruled by your own biased judgments, if you are. Because you could seek out insight. You could seek out different or broader perspectives, more information, and a far stronger, more authoritative, less reactionary modality of response to everything and anything. Especially when in reality, something isn't even intentionally threatening to you at all. Consider actually summoning your better angels instead of screaming that you have them and that they need you to avoid evil. You actually summon them to share their wisdom with you rather than just being convinced that it's somehow holy or good to avoid anything that challenges your comfort zones. Piety and complacency often go hand in hand, and real magic has no room for dogma, even when the abuses of it are being self-enforced, as they seem to be here. Now, on to today's main lesson. Before that, though, as well, I just want to say thank you so much again to all the people who send direct messages that aren't at all like this one. And thank you to the person who sent this one. Thank you to the person who was so offended and sent this, intentionally, it was quixotically rude message about this whole situation. Because it created a beautiful lesson. So thank you for sharing your experience. Clearly, it mattered very, very much to you to express it in order for you to take the time and energy to complain to me. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your experience with me. And thank you as well to everyone who sends in the constant, I listen to your podcast every week, or I listen to it while I'm driving, while I'm brushing my teeth and getting ready in the shower in the morning. All the beautiful, success stories of this podcast is what started getting me into the occult as it actually is, for common sense and genuine, life-affirming reasons. And it's helped me in so many ways. Every week I have someone that's like, it's helped me quit smoking. It's helped me get the raise I wanted at work. And that is what real magic can do. It is, an endless, beautiful, engaging, spiraling journey that allows us to evolve on this path that we're walking together. And I appreciate all of you and really appreciate the time you take to write me messages. Back to today's actual lesson. It's going to be on the Philosopher's Stone. Because here is a symbol, much like this other symbol of the skull that someone wrote to me and complained and demanded a refund and all of these other things. Someone wrote in a message about this symbol, the Philosopher's Stone, and chosen to inquire rather than judge, rather than label and then automatically be insulted by a thing. They saw it, they didn't know what it was, and they weren't scared, they weren't frightened, they weren't uncomfortable, they didn't automatically assume that they understood it entirely or completely, and instead chose to write this direct message. Can you tell me about this symbol? Or maybe do a whole lesson or two on it. I sense that you would know quite a bit about it from your background. I do know that it is a transmutation symbol, and I've read interpretations of it being linked with spirituality in different esoteric groups. I love that you use the word esoteric. There's never a problem with you taking some great grammar classes, really presenting yourself as an authority on any subject. And elocution classes too. That's something we do within second grade work for a lot of our neos. So just beautifully written sentence. Wanted to point that out. Anything you know about it would be very appreciated. I feel very driven, a very strong urge to know more about it specifically from you. I feel very drawn to you and your work and enjoy your lessons every week. I feel very strongly about this symbol. Can you tell me why? And then there's a black and white image underneath, and it's just the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone attached to this direct message. Just straightforward clip art. So, to answer this other symbol-esque direct message for the week, and to answer your last question first, about, can you tell me why you feel drawn to it? Yes and no. No, I can't tell you why you're drawn to it because I'm not you, beautiful fellow co-creator. So your experience is yours. But yes, I can tell you why at the same time, and it's because it's meant for you. All circles close and patterns resonate. Magi are drawn to the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone because it is for them. Or more clearly, it is of them. So it makes all the sense in the world that your path has led you to it. This symbol contains so many layers, so many beautiful secrets, so many, unwrapping, engaging, evolving as you open it up, as you delve into it. And the thing about symbols, all of them, is, especially in the occult, when you want, say, a divine, sacred teaching to last through the ages, you don't try to drill those things into people, and you don't scream about them from the rooftops. When you really want something to last, you turn it into a story. Stories get passed down through us, despite us. Even when we destroy our own records, they linger in the matrix of the psyche and in the matrix of space and time. They filter through all of our languages, all of our tribes, all of our structures and definitions of cultural understanding. And symbols are stories. They're stories told visually, completely, and simplistically. And that is what makes them so powerful. They are visual, mental, often mathematical stories. Symbols are stories that not only force the person viewing them to interpret for themselves, because there's no one there to explain it. So you have to actually engage with it. But also, a symbol allows them to interpret it for themselves, even if the person arriving to stare at that image is 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 years later, and there's no one to tell them what it means. A symbol is a story that doesn't need you to know any specific context, any specific language to read it, or any language at all to interpret it. At least not how we understand verbal audio language. And the best stories are always the simplest, the most direct. That's why when we do sigil work, we remove all those consonants. We really just want it to be simple and clean. That is how it's going to transmute across a plane and also enter our own subconscious cleanly and powerfully. So same idea here. The most powerful symbols are the most direct. They bypass the conscious mind and they enter us. Those symbols which speak directly to the evaluation of the entity, any entity that comes into contact with them. And the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone, yes, it's this seemingly deceivingly simplistic image of a circle within square, within triangle, triumvirate, within circle, sphere again, is one of, if not the purest, most powerful of occult symbols passed down through the ages. Now, there is some disagreement here dependent on opinion among experienced occultists. I've heard inspiring argumentation and debate for why the Monas Hieroglyphica might be even more resonant than the Philosopher's Stone symbol, the Magnus Opum, but that is neither here or now. There's certainly neck and neck, I'll say that much. Although my own reasoning would suggest that the Philosopher's Stone's power may be greater from what I felt personally. I believe due to its popular relevance, there's more engagement within that egregore, as far fewer have ever stopped to mull over that hieroglyphic monad. But that's just me personally. Anyway, encapsulating stories into images into transferable legend, sigil spell work, which is what all language is, it's what the alphabet is, has long been the purview of occultists, because not only do symbols and magic preserve and persevere our most treasured teachings, they also contain the ability to transform. As you mentioned, as you've already intuited, the Philosopher's Stone image in particular is a transmutational, a transformational symbol. That energy, that ability, makes it energetically sacred, even as it encapsulates an entire realm of layered knowledge, of wisdoms, a story that can be read by anyone and everyone who wishes to, for as long as mankind exists, even when there's no podcast left to explain it. I won't say too much. I know you asked, what does it mean? It does mean what, again, you've already intuited. It does have spiritual connotations, and it does have embedded information inside of it. It has both. But I won't say too much about what the image does or doesn't imply specifically, because it's magic. It's magic that you already are sensing. It's magic that you already can feel is being held in sacred trust for you within its very interpretation by you. And I won't undo that. It's part of your sacred duty to seek that magic out, to reveal it, to find it and embody it, engage with it for yourself, meditate on it, with it, come into a comprehension and realization of all the different powers and secrets held within this image, of its depths, its energies. And I am not going to take that miracle from you. I will say that if what we do in our great work is searching for the light, if that's one way we can go about describing it, the personal discovery of the light is found here in this marking for those who have eyes to see. Just as it's found when we perform the great rituals of the craft and allow ourselves to come into the fulfillment of embodying that light, harmonizing and vibrating our powers. So it's fairly common for an Adeptus Minor who's working their way through but not beginning grade work, whether or not they know it, it is fairly common to come into contact with this symbol specifically and have their eye drawn to it, have it pull them, have it beg for interpretation, the way you describe it's now doing to you. Your feet are very much pointed in the right direction here. Most formal orders include deep meditation on the Philosopher's Stone in part, and then culminating in unity within their intrinsic gradework curriculums, as there is an actual Philosopher's Stone evocation that can't be performed or energetically entered into without that earlier work of reflection being done first, that absorption and contemplation coming first. Total harmony of the four elements, the entirety of the powers of nature is hidden deep within the stone. And that isn't something you just blindly reach for and then manage to wield. It requires a level of dewy-eyed preparedness that's also entered into knowingly. Not to be too cryptic, but synthesis requires groundwork. And the true art is an alchemical process. You can't gain access to it without doing the groundwork first. And that entirety of that process, it could never be explained in a simple little humble podcast lesson, nor could its energetic signature be passed in such a way from me to you through this sort of a forum. It's just not possible. It's not how this specific alchemical process works. Look to the symbol. You're on the right path, fellow occultist, and I am so glad you asked about this. And remember, as you walk, the sacred trust that you and I and all others with access to this mystery, even as we're just learning it, just beginning to enter into it. Remember that sacred trust to guard and hold it for all who will come after you. Until next time.